Welcome, everyone. My name is Gabriel, and we've got a panel today with Chris, Jameson, and Eva, and we're going to be discussing how to get your talk accepted into a conference, maybe like this, or a different conference. We're going to explore the different strategies you can use, the different submission techniques you can use, what people look for, and also explore some of the statistics around actually getting into a conference, especially one of this size, local. So, Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Gabriel. My name's Chris Tite. I'm CTO of a small, well, not so small anymore, software development company in Durban, and I've been speaking at DevConf for a long time, and I really enjoy this event, and I'm glad to share some of the tips with you today.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Jameson Alea. It's my first DevConf and my first time in South Africa. I'm here from the US, and I'm really excited to be here. I had applied for DevConf like at least 3 or 4 times before I got accepted, so I can talk about getting rejected and getting accepted to conferences.
Hello, I'm Eva, and I'm a tester at Showmax. And this is my very first in-person conference that I'm speaking at, so it's having been accepted is a very fresh and new experience, and I believe I can offer maybe a different perspective than all these seasoned, experienced speakers.
Great. With that said, I'd like to just kick off with a few statistics specifically about DevConf. So there were 622 talk submissions. Out of those 622, this is a very interesting stat, fully one third, were only local submissions. And we should probably unpack that as well a little bit, because out of 622, only a third of them being South African. But that also means that 2/3 were international, which means that we've got some visibility on the international scene. The review process went through multiple stages, but the very, very first stage was completely blind. So they didn't know your name, race, gender, anything. It was purely based on the merit of your abstract. From all of that, with a team of 21 reviewers, only 29 talks actually made it through, which is a 4% success rate. Obviously, you can't choose like 622 talks. But yeah, I mean, out of all of that 4%, it's a pretty tough and competitive race that you're going to need to run. So let's dive in. Chris, you were one of the reviewers.
Correct.
Can you talk a little bit about what you were looking for in a submission?
I think something that grabbed you, something that was different and fresh, something that was unique. To give you an example, ChatGPT was a fair number of submissions this year, as we could well imagine. And I think the person who got my vote on the ChatGPT had actually used ChatGPT to present his ideas. And I found that pretty incredible. And so that stood out for me. So I'm always looking for things that are different, things that I feel would pique my interest. Things that are just a twist on what we would just look for at an event. Combinations of ideas, combinations of technologies, something that's just not the vanilla. I couldn't find this on the internet, is really what I would be looking for.
Okay. And Jameson, from your side, can you talk to us a little bit about what made your submission this year different? What was the special sauce that got you through this time?
It's kind of a hard question because it's like when you submit to a conference, you're kind of giving control of your proposal up to the organizers. And I think that a lot of it has to do with like what talks would make a good fit for the program they're trying to put together in like a certain year. Like I'm pretty sure I had even applied with this same talk in the past and had it been rejected. But like I've been on the other side reading reviews for other conferences as well. And like I know that means you're going to have to turn down a lot of talks that are probably really interesting and excellent, but that just don't fit quite in with kind of the narrative that you're trying to tell with the talks at a conference. And so I guess my answer to that is just like resilience and not giving up. Like just because your talk may not have been a good fit one year, that doesn't even necessarily mean that the same event a different year wouldn't look at the same submission and go, oh, well, actually this fits in really well with what we're trying to say this year.
So timing plays a component.
Yeah, I think so, for sure.
Okay. Well, interesting point about rejections for this year. Out of all the talks that were not selected, let me not say rejected, but not selected, only 80 people asked for feedback for the reason why their talk was rejected. That feedback took the form of an email with some quantitative information. The blind process ranked you wherever out of this category of talks similar to yours, but there's also some qualitative feedback that said maybe do this or try that or rephrase it this way. Have you ever gotten any feedback on a rejection or given any feedback?
I, early in my speaking career, received the feedback to include an outline, and that's something that I've normally tried to do, even if it's a pretty basic outline of like, I haven't written this talk yet, but these are the things that I want to cover in this kind of order and hit on them, and then that's feedback that serves me well and that I've then given to other people, because like when you're an organizer and trying to make a decision, an often very difficult decision about what talks to accept, you're trying to guess essentially which of those proposals you think are going to translate into really good talks. And it's hard to know because writing a good proposal and writing a good talk aren't really actually necessarily the exact same skill. And so the more information someone can tell me about these are the things that I intend to cover in the talk, the more of an idea it gives me about what that talk's actually going to look like, and makes it much easier to make that guess about like, oh yes, I think this talk's going to be excellent. They really thought through like what, even if they're not making the points yet, what points they want to make. And I find that very helpful.
Quite comprehensive. I want to...
Do you mind if I comment on that?
Oh, please do.
That is incredibly useful information. And I can't explain how many times you go through a talk and you're wading through a whole lot of information and you're trying to visualize what this actually is. And if there's one thing I can say to anybody submitting a talk, that outline is very, very useful. If you think about it, 620 talks are submitted. In the ranking process, the people that are reviewing these talks are going to review those talks over and over and over in the way in which it works. And you have to be able to very clearly define what's going to come out of your talk, because at some point that will start blurring into one big mess.
I want to actually bounce over to you, Eva, unless you have anything to comment on that. Your talk in particular was quite fascinating to me in the context of this topic, because you told me you worked at Showmax, you don't work at like JPL or NASA, but your talk is about like how a line of code crashed a rocket.
Yes.
So maybe there's some overlap. There's lessons to learn definitely for all developers, but your talk is just like completely not your day job, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so can you talk a little bit about how you approached that submission? Kind of give us the flavor of like what were you going for and how were you hoping to reach out to the conference organizers with your submission?
Well, since this is my first real talk. Up until this point, I've done just one online talk, but not in-person one. I wasn't really thinking about the selection process. I just wrote what I thought was a good abstract, and that was it. But yeah, I need to include an outline next time. Thank you. but my thought process was that this is just a cool story to share, and that I can, through telling this story, I can share my views, my own personal views on software quality and how like the company processes and the interpersonal communication are a integral part of that. So it was kind of like using the story that is in no way related to my work to convey what I'm actually using at work daily.
So there's if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that if you submit a talk that on the surface has nothing to do with your work, it's a cool story, it's always important to make sure that there's some learning you can impart on your audience?
I can't speak from experience because, I don't know, maybe there are some cool talks out there that have like nothing to do with the person's work, but as I see it personally, a talk needs to be your personal experience, something that you are living, because your story is unique. It doesn't make any sense to repeat what you've read in a textbook somewhere. It's your story, and by sharing your story, you're sharing something unique that nobody else has, and that is always valuable.
Yeah. No one's coming here to have a Wikipedia article read to them.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I wonder if we can switch gears and talk a little bit about the hard versus soft talks. It's a bit of a loaded word, hard versus soft. There might be some, connotations behind them. I want to make it very clear that it's really just like sort of technical versus the human or interpersonal side of things. Both are really valuable at a conference. Do any of you have anything to share around how you would approach giving a talk like that, how you position it, where you see its value in?
I can just tell you that when I submitted the proposal, I thought it's going to be a hard talk. And then, as I was working on it and digging deeper into it, and with the time and experience that elapsed from December, it turned out to be a soft talk after all. So I was like digging deeper underneath those hard skills, those technical things, and really deeper into what's underneath every process of software development, and that is the people who are creating it.
Turn out it was people all along.
I totally agree with that. I have given almost exclusively like people-themed talks since I've been doing speaking, nothing extremely technical. And at first I felt self-conscious about that. Like I was worried that people would think that I like didn't know enough about the technical side to have anything to say about that, and I don't think that's true. It's just that like I really enjoy attending people talks over highly technical talks at conferences. Like, while I've seen some really excellent technical talks and I've learned a lot from them, I tend to feel like if I wanted to learn a specific technology, like there's a lot of resources that I could go to for that, like recorded talks or tutorials or lots of ways that I could like go online and learn about that. But with like people-themed talks, soft talks, like any different speaker that you see giving a talk even about the exact same topic is going to be totally different because it's going to be from like a new perspective. And so I found that I enjoyed attending those talks, and so that kind of made me realize like, oh, actually I think what I'm doing with my perspective in people talks like is also valuable.
So some thoughts on that. I've done both. I find the softer, to Jameson's point, the softer is a little bit more of your own story, and you can tell a narrative which is closer to you. The technical talks become a little bit more difficult. For me, it's going to be finding all of the edge cases. So every technical talk that I've ever submitted to DevConf has always been a complete edge case that you couldn't find somewhere. It's a combination of technologies, a combination of technical problems that you couldn't find the solution out on the web very, very quickly. To give an example, we used some esoteric replication technology that fed into a Kafka stream that then went into some sort of event sourcing technology. That's the complexity that I brought into one of the talks. And that's the unique stuff that you cannot find anywhere. It's just your working experience. This is something so cool that not a lot of people are going to be able to see it, and I really want to share it. So it is harder to find those elements because it's so much easier to find technology out there. So you can do the harder talks, the hard technology style talks, but again, it's got to be a very hard twist to be able to get people to understand these things. Or technology that's emerging where you're probably at the forefront of that. Last year's talk I did was on data fabrics. I work for a company that has built a data fabric, so I understand the technology behind that. And so it's not a technology that's known by a lot of people. It's not something we're all talking about at the moment. And so you can actually lean into something that not a lot of people know about. But yeah, for hard talks, that's going to be the trick. Is not Wikipediaing it, or ChatGPT.
And can you?
Just one thing.
Oh, yeah,
I
go for
totally
it.
agree with what you said about like emerging technology. My favorite soft talks that I've seen have been like real narratives, but my favorite technical talks that I've seen have been like when the person giving the talk is clearly like extremely excited about the technology that they're trying to tell you about. I think that always makes for like a good talk because I like to hear about things that people are excited about in general.
How would you convey that excitement pre the talk? Because I agree.
Exclamation points.
It's a differentiator, right?
There's a conference in the States called Bang Bang Con, and it's all about like short, like 10 to 15 minute talks about like something that you're excited about is like the pitch. And they call it Bang Bang Con because every title has to end in an exclamation point. That's like their submission rule.
Okay.
But if someone has a more serious answer to that question,
I think it's perfect. So you gave a very specific, almost esoteric talk on data fabrics last year, Chris. Do you think that there is a balance to giving a talk like that at a very large conference that has multiple topics and multiple streams versus giving a highly specific, highly specialized talk at a conference dedicated, to your example, to like data fabric or like ETL pipelines? And
I think there's always space for interesting topics. The point of going to these conferences is to learn new elements. And so going to a specific narrow event is useful, but at the same time, these technologies need to get out there and people need to be aware of them. And so being able to talk about something that's very specific at a more generalist conference is, I think, valuable. Yeah.
would any of you position your submission differently for a different conference if you knew that it was a buffet style conference like this versus a single track focused conference?
For me personally, not really, because I tend to do people talks. I do a lot of talks about like ethics in the industry and mental health and like diversity inclusion. And I think that those are things that are pretty relevant no matter what like part of the tech stack that you work in. And so for me, it's kind of more which conferences or even which like parts of the tech community value those things. And it doesn't necessarily have to be technology that's kind of in my forte. Like I'm primarily a Ruby person and I do a lot of Ruby conferences, but I also find myself doing like DevOps conferences. I don't actually even know that much about DevOps, but I've found that the DevOps community in my area tends to like care about the same kinds of things that I care about, and therefore they like to have those kind of talks.
Okay, Ruby. So one of the topics that when we were discussing how this panel would work was, what about junior people that might not have a lot of work experience, how would they approach getting into a conference? Like, what should junior folk focus on?
I found that more junior folks tend to assume that like you have to be a complete expert in whatever topic it is that you're about to talk about, and I don't think that that's true at all. I think actually that giving a talk can be a great excuse to really learn about something in great detail. And I've found that like someone who learned something recently is often better at teaching it than someone who's been like an expert in it forever, because like they have a more recent perspective on what it feels like to not know that thing. And so to like have a talk that's being taught by someone who like learned it recently, I find actually cool and valuable.
So you're nodding your head ferociously.
Yes, well, I am in that boat because I'm in the software industry for like 4 years, so I still consider myself mediocre at best. So yes, I think I completely agree with what you said, that many people are intimidated from applying to conferences because they think they don't have anything to say yet. But everybody has something to say. Everybody has their own story to share, and yeah.
So let's talk about the road that someone can take to getting to talking at a conference. Nobody, springs fully formed and then plops on the stage and gives a keynote like Arun this morning. These things take practice, maybe even some baby steps. Do you have any advice around like how you can start out? You don't have to start out at a conference.
Yeah. I feel the biggest barrier is people not even applying, either because they're intimidated by the idea of public speaking and they assume they're not good at it, or they assume they don't have anything interesting to share. Mm-hmm. But both are wrong. Obviously, public speaking is a skill that takes a shitload of work, and basically everybody can learn it. And it's true that jumping right into a full-blown talk is intimidating, but there are other less difficult, less intimidating ways. I'm a member of the Ministry of Testing, which is like the most amazing software testing community in the observable universe. And they've got this concept of 99-second talks, where anybody can come up on stage and talk for 1 or 2 minutes about something they're excited about or something they want to share. And it's a really easy way to get introduced to speaking in public. Or they've got workshops where they help the speakers develop it, they support them the whole way. So if you reach out to people, there are people out there who are willing to help you, who are willing to work with you, who are willing to practice your talk with you, who are willing to review your abstract. Reach out to people. They are there for you.
I agree with all of that. I think there's a lot of like good places that you can flex that muscle first, like user groups and meetup groups, at your own company, internal presentations. I've done internal presentations that I got asked to do, but I've also done internal presentations where it's just like, can I practice this talk that I want to like submit for conferences? I also love to encourage people to do lightning talks. I don't know if lightning talks. Okay, cool. Lightning talks in South Africa. I think lightning talks are really good practice because you're like doing a user group or at your company are practicing like the speaking and writing a talk and content part, but like lightning talks are practicing the like getting up on an actual stage in front of actual people part. And I love lightning talks because they're like quick and easy. You can talk about whatever you want, and like the pressure is less because they're so short that like the thing that I fret about when I'm giving a talk is like, what if someone feels like they're stuck here for 40 minutes listening to my talk that they don't like and they don't think they can leave, which they can. But with lightning talks, it's like, well, if you think it's boring, in 5 minutes, someone else will be talking about something else, so I'm over it.
Yeah, to support that, I think the developer user group does that. They have in Durban and in Johannesburg. Are we still going in Centurion? No. No, okay.
We're online and in Cape Town.
All right. So the developer user group, and that's how I got introduced to speaking in public. That's how I met Candice, and Robert was my first attempt at a talk. It wasn't a lightning. It wasn't a 40-minute. It was a shortish talk. And I think reaching out to user groups is very useful. The lightning talks I find incredibly useful for some of my younger staff to get involved in. And to Jameson's point, internally, brown bags are an incredibly simple concept. Get somebody around for lunch. Everybody does a little bit of a talk and shares some technology or shares some experience. And that's a very easy way to get into talking.
I wonder if we can, again, switch gears and talk about some of the opportunities that have opened up for you as a result of, hitting the conference circuit.
Yeah, I can start from that. I would say just an incredible opening to new speakers. I think being a speaker, what you guys don't see is what happens behind the scenes. It's being in the speaker room. It's having the conference. It's the conference. It's a conference that you guys don't necessarily get to see. And so becoming a speaker is incredibly useful. You start to talk more detail about somebody's talk behind the scenes. You get a lot more detail about how they approach certain things. You make an incredible network of friends who you can lean on. There's a number of people that I've talked at conferences on, and it's like, hey, they talked about that. I've got a business problem or I've got a technical problem. Let me reach out and let me start that conversation. And so I've found that my network has got incredibly big, incredibly quickly. And it's been a very rewarding network. It's rewarding to see people that you speak with at another conference, and there's this camaraderie and this great fellowship of speakers as you move through. So I'd encourage you to dip into that.
It's also very rewarding when you get feedback from the listeners. That online talk I did was on autism, because I'm autistic personally. And afterwards, several people reached out to me and told me that it helped them understand their autistic relatives or kids and basically have a better relationship with them. And that is so incredibly, I'm getting emotional about it. That is something absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I agree with everything that both of you said. I've had experiences kind of like that, talking about mental health too, and it's incredibly rewarding. I also find that it's just a great way to meet people, both other speakers and just like anyone at conferences. Like I have some social anxiety, which people say like they don't believe because I'll get up on stage and act like it's easy or whatever. But the thing that I find really hard is like going up to someone I don't know and like just starting a conversation with them. And I find that like when I'm speaking at a conference, I don't really have to do that because people come up and start a conversation with me and then they ask me to talk about a thing that I really care about. So that's been like really a great experience. And I agree about the network. Like I haven't ever been like, oh, I clearly got this job because of public speaking, but I feel like I've gotten jobs because I know a lot of people and they know about me, and like that happens over time from speaking and is really valuable for your career.
Amazing. Yeah, so we're moving into questions now, so perfect.
How do you guys plan a talk if you work with time? I struggle to figure out how, because there's so much research and planning, and how do you actually do it that you get to an end point? You're like, cool.
So, sorry, Jameson. So, just for the cameras, the question was, how do you find the time in amongst your life and your day job and everything else to plan a talk, put it together, practice, like the whole thing? What do you do? How do you find the time?
It's hard. It's hard, especially because I'm a procrastinator. So this year I had to drop off from a course I really cared about because I just wasn't able to make it work with my work and with my kid and with everything else that was going on and with getting ready for this talk. So I had to prioritize.
Part of your question was like, how do you know when it's done? And like, it's never done. Like, I'll probably change my talk in between giving it today and giving it on Thursday. The more conferences I do, the more I know other speakers and like notice what other speakers are doing. And I've definitely seen speakers like sitting in the audience and like the talk before their talk, like changing their slides. So it's like, I guess that's kind of like existentially terrifying, but also like a comfort to be like, it's never done, because then there's always more, but it's also always feels like I can keep iterating and I can keep making it better. And talks that I've been giving for longer than other talks are definitely better than talks that are like brand new for me.
Yeah. You have a question? You have a question?
Can I just quickly answer something there and just give you some tips? So to the never done, it is never done. And be comfortable with the fact that it's never done. But my suggestion on preparing your talk is I never write my entire talk out. I put my slides together. I've got a story I'd like to weave. I put my slides together, and I've got 3 to 4 important points that I want to raise in that talk. One thing you guys must remember is nobody's ever seen your talk. They don't care if you get it wrong. They don't care if you get a miss. They don't care if you get a word out of place. So write those 4 points on that slide, the points that you want to raise. Just remember those points, you walk through those points, and just talk around those points.
Yeah, you have a question.
Maybe this one is for Chris, because the opportunity of looking at maybe different applications. Are there any common mistakes or pitfalls that we should avoid when submitting a proposal?
So the question is, are there any common mistakes that you typically see, or pitfalls that are like easy to filter out, that we can avoid when making an application?
Yeah, there are some very, very common mistakes. So the talks that get knocked out very quickly are the one-liner talks. The talks that are as long as your title. I can't make an informed decision as to whether this is going to be a good or bad talk based on 2 to 3 lines of information. And it sounds crazy. Like, why would somebody submit like that? But I think there are a large number of talk submissions where it's not enough detail to be able to actually understand. Then the talks that are just like, I want to talk about Docker. Like, Docker's 7 years old, guys. Like, find something new. So there's a number of those types of talks. The talks that are just a wall of text, and you've got to try and walk it through. So I think, give the assessor some kind of a break. Just to give you an idea of what it's like on DevConf, there's 622 talks, and the way it works is they have 3 talks up front. You read the talks and you grade them, first, second, third. And you do that round and round. It's almost like a chess game, and these things are ranked and ranked and ranked, and you read the same talk probably 6 or 7 times, and when you're posing it against everything. Now, imagine a wall of text with very little structure and the exhaustion you're going to start going through. So make it easier for the person to understand. Don't choose topics that are easy to Google, and give me something that I can work up. And then, as you say, a nice little twist on what you've got. Tell your story. Those are the most important talks for me. I don't know if you guys.
One pitfall that I would add is that, like, if there's even one sentence in a description for a talk that makes me think that person's going to be like condescending to the audience about the topic, like if it's a competitive conference, even one hint of that is like, well, I don't want to risk that. So.
And proofread your abstract, or have somebody proofread it for you.
Most conferences will have instructions on their CFPs, right? DevConf had instructions. Follow the instructions. Question for the man at the back.
This question is also for Chris, and this leads on to the previous question. So apologies to mention this, but I was also one of the speaker reviewers. How did you, when we got to the point of all of the talks that
had pitfalls and they've been filtered out. Now we're getting to the point where you're seeing three talks that you love. Now you have to rank them. What was the secret sauce, or what was the thing that made a talk stand out to you at that point?
Bribery? The question, the question for the cameras was, once you've gone through the general elimination process of the blind reviews and you start getting closer to what the final selection looks like, how do you choose between three seemingly equally great talks?
It's incredibly hard. At that point, I stopped thinking about what am I interested in, and like what is the community around me going to be interested in? What are the organizers of this event going to be able to pitch in a better way? What's going to draw somebody? So you start off by going, okay, how do I feel about these elements, until the point where you switch and go, okay, what is, you know, remember, I own my own company, so this commercial thing starts flipping in my head, and I'm going, okay, so what is going to be in a commercially attractive element? What are people really going to be looking at? And then it makes it a little easier. It's still darn hard. There are a number of times when I tied talks. I can't make a decision. Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question.
So I've done a bit of public speaking myself, and I love it. And I tell people like it's a bit of an adrenaline rush. So the question is, am I alone in that? And does it ever go away?
Question for the camera is, this guy has done public speaking in the past, and every time you do it, there's an adrenaline rush. You freak out. And does it ever go away?
You are not alone in that, and in my experience, it doesn't go away. I've been doing speaking for like 6 or 7 years now, and I get nervous before every talk still. Maybe a little less nervous than when I was new at it, but still nervous. And then it feels like a blur after it's done. Like when people come up and like say to you at the end, like, oh, I liked your talk, thank you, and like that's a great feeling. And then I immediately forget all of those people's faces forever. And I have I'm not great with faces anyway, but like if you talk to me right after I'm done speaking, I have not put you in my brain, I'm sorry. But I find that like I often tell people, like my friends, especially like friends that don't do conferences, will say like, oh, well, you know, you do this all the time and it always goes so great. Like you still get nervous, really? And like I think the day that I stop getting nervous will be like the day that I'm not doing a good job at being a speaker anymore.
Also, people tend to assume that they are incapable of presenting because they get so nervous. But it's actually a learned skill to talk through the nerves. You may be still just as nervous as you were the first time, but there are techniques and skills to kind of make it seem like you're not. I was giving this a dry run of this talk for a meetup I was organizing, and it was terrible. I rushed through it in like 15 minutes, and I kept forgetting to breathe until I sounded like this. And people were worried that I'm gonna faint. But I learned that I need to employ some breathing techniques and stuff like that. So these are definitely things that can be worked on and learned independently on whether you're nervous or not.
Great. I think that's it. We've run out of time. Okay, one more question. Make it sound like one.
The first question is, who are public speakers that you guys look up to or take inspiration from? Can be anyone. And then secondly, any podcasts that you listen to.
So any public speakers that you model yourselves after, look up to, and any podcasts that you listen to?
My most favorite public speaker is Malcolm Gladwell. I think the storytelling, the engagement, it's just a big hero for me. Our podcasts, not really a podcast kind of person, but yeah.
A speaker who I really look up to in the Ruby community is Aaron Patterson. I think that he is like a great combination of like funny stage presence and also like highly technical, interesting information, and he like makes it look easy to combine those things together. I'm gonna plug my podcast. So I used to be on a podcast called Greater Than Code. It's currently defunct. Hopefully we'll bring it back sometime in the future. But it was originally a Ruby show, but it really very specifically branched out into like, let's talk about the people stories from behind the people that like are responsible for this tech. And so it quickly stopped being like a Ruby thing and became a very human thing. And I was asked to join Greater Than Code specifically after like I gave a talk and then someone came up and was like, I really liked your talk. Do you want to be on my podcast? So that's a very tangible opportunity that I got from speaking. And it was a show that I already really looked up to. So it was awesome to be part of.
So as for me, anybody who's been on TED, that's basically a great resource of effective speaking and storytelling. And in terms of podcasts, no such thing as a fish, which is not a software podcast, but it's an interesting podcast full of random, interesting trivia. And my brain loves to collect trivia.
Yeah. Richmond Holland, an amazing local South African speaker. Yeah. Great. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, panel.